Chicago.
Amen.
Is it Amen?
So, good evening, all of my friends and sisters and brothers. I ran into Sister Joanne and Brother Lewis here last night, and they let me know that Dr. Black was under the weather a little bit, and asked me if I might be willing to step up and share something for class this week. Initially, I shied away from it, like, ooh, that's a huge responsibility. It took me less than about 2 minutes before I thought better, and I thought about how there was one of Dr. Black's works that he's been wanting to share and discuss with everyone for a long time, and there's been some trouble in getting everybody to read it. Some of it's been some actual technical issues with a file not being in the right place. So I do have some copies for folks who have purchased Dr. Black's disc and therefore have not they may not actually been able to see the file to look at and interact with his work, Violence in the Promised Land. So I thought about this is something particularly that I studied a lot, and that in the way that this is all about community and a communion of the ideas and maximizing that some of us have different strengths and we have different abilities, and the idea is to get everybody synced up on the same page of these ideas while recognizing who may have something different to contribute in different areas, right? And this is particularly one that I can give back to this room because of the time that I spent studying it. So we're going to take tonight as an introduction to the work, because it is an extremely complicated work in the way that Dr. Black teaches us to ask questions, to take some data and then go make sure that that's true, to go know about it for ourselves. This work, Violence in the Promised Land, is an extremely dense work. There are more ideas in the 34 pages of this work than you will find in a great many textbooks that are hundreds and hundreds of pages, because he's bringing together an immense collection of a lot of thoughts. So to start with how to get into this work and to introduce to it, the best place, of course, would probably be with our dictionaries, right? So let's first look. The title is Violence in the Promised Land. So let's be sure we know what violence is. So young people, let me get you your dictionaries here. Let's get I've got a few more down here to pass out. Let's have y'all looking at what? So let's see who can find the word violence.
Look up violence, everyone.
I found violence.
You did? Okay.
Well, I found violence.
Mm-hmm.
Then it tells me, it says Middle English, Old French, Latin, violentia, from violentus, and it says violent.
Okay.
Then I go down to violent,
Mm-hmm.
and it says the same thing.
Okay.
And then the first definition of violent is acting with or characterized by great physical force so as to injure or damage others.
Okay. So we have the origin of the word being about physical force, right? What you got?
Violence.
So you found violence also? Do you see the same thing? No? What do you see? Okay. So we get, this is a very old word, right? And we get that our lexicographers in their first definitions are, by the way that we know, definitions limit meanings of words in a way, right?
Right.
We see that the lexicographer is establishing this word to be about physical harm, right? I think that's what we're getting, force, right? Okay. Let's look for some more words related to that. Like, let's find the word fight.
Let's go, B. Find the word fight.
And while they're looking for the folks that just joined us, I was asked and honored to step up and help with the class tonight with Dr. Black under the weather a little bit. So I'm sharing something that I studied intensely on his recommendation, something he's been wanting us to get back to and discuss in depth, and that's his work called Violence in the Promised Land. If any of y'all have purchased his disc before and a copy of that information is not on there, then I do have some copies of that to make sure that you get it. Okay? Oh, how about James? Let's get James.
Middle English, fighting, fetching, Anglo-Saxon, fealtin, akin to Greek, fetchtin,
Right. So that seems to be a very different conception of what's going on. So we see a little bit of a contrast. This is a different kind of thought from what we see in violence. So related again, let's turn to the word struggle.
It first suggests that they go to the word fought.
Right, which he. So let's make sure to cover fought there then. Mr. Lewis is recommending.
Okay, so all I'm getting is just the past tense of fight.
Mm-hmm. And the core of it seems to be something about combs and wool.
Right.
It also said to overcome.
To overcome. So there's possibly a positive message in that word. So far we've got one word, violent. This is coming out of the Greek Roman tradition. We're getting this word fight is coming out of the Anglo-Saxon language, right? And do we know where were the Anglo-Saxon people living at that time when that language was around? Do we know? Because in tracing this history, that's actually a pretty big thing to make sure we know. Is who were the Anglo-Saxons? I do know Anglo-Saxon was a blend of different people who were living in what we would call England.
It was a blend of Anglos and Saxons.
Mm-hmm.
So is Anglo actually the word, or is it Anglo is what?
Anglo is people who were on those what we would call British Isles.
And they were Anglo people, that's it.
Right.
That's the name.
Right. And what kind of comes up here is that the British Isles were conquered over and over again in ways that affected the language and blended the people. Right. So out of those people, they had the word fight. So did we get to struggle? Yep. What you got?
I got Middle English, struggling, FREQ,
Frequent.
formation, probably, partly, echoing.
So probably partly. Seems like
They don't know.
may not be entirely sure, other than this word comes out of somewhere in the same people at around the same time.
Yeah, they don't know.
Right? Not entirely sure. So I think this means that this is going to be a topic that we're going to have to look really closely at in order to get a sense of where we are with violence in the world today. When we talk about violence and we talk about receiving it and experiencing it, I think we might have heard of having violence acted upon myself. Or we might have had violence is a threat to my person. And we definitely are concerned about what violence means to our bodies, right? I think that's the first place. So let's look up, while we're getting a context in these words, let's look up the word body to make sure we have a context for that.
Violence is a violation to my body. And violation and violence go hand in hand.
Right.
Hi.
That's certainly a part. For the guys who haven't met, my name's Adam White, and I've been studying with Dr. Black here for several months, and with him under the weather, I was invited to do what I can to help facilitate a class tonight. So here we are, and we're discussing his work, Violence in the Promised Land. So did we find body?
I found body.
Okay. Go ahead for me.
Middle English, body, bodied, Anglo-Saxon, body, or ridge, sense, cast, as in Oh High German. Oh High German. Bata, Batacha, Greek, Vatich.
So I
What's
get
MLG?
Middle Low.
Middle Low German.
Middle Low German. Badike, tub, for brewing.
okay. So Sounds like you said a tub, a cask.
Yes.
So this sounds like this is talking about containers. So if this is a container that there might be violence on, what is it containing, right? Let's turn back then to.
You might want to hear this, Mr. Adams.
Yes, ma'am.
The whole physical structure and substance of a man, animal, or plant. That's the first.
The physical substance of it.
The song.
So that's what they're saying is the definition from the lexicographer. But the origin of the word is talking about containers.
Yeah, it says the original sense is cask. C-A-S-K.
And what is a cask?
Let's go to that.
When I think about that, I almost think about a casket.
I would say definitely.
Right.
Mhm.
Found it.
Awesome.
Middle English, cask. French, casque,
Cask.
cask. Casco, pot,
Pot shoe.
pot shoe, cask,
Helmet.
helmet,
Helmet.
cask car, to break.
We're definitely getting some good color as far as how these words all are connecting there. So we've got helmet. And what was the other word that came up there?
To break, see quash. And it's spelled Q-U-A-S-H.
This is turning into quite a journey.
Hmm?
This is turning into quite a journey. I've heard
Q-U-A-S-H.
quash in relation to violence. So
See quash.
yeah. So let's see quash while we're at it then.
I have quash.
You got quash. You're quick. Go for it.
Middle English, quashing. Old French, quasser. Latin, quasar, to shake, shatter, shiver. Intent from quassus, past participle of quatir, to shake or break.
So we have shaking. We have breaking. What else did we get there?
Shatter, shiver.
Shatter, shiver. These are all pretty strong words.
It's listed twice, and she did the etymology of the second
Mhm.
entry, and it's always best to do the first one.
Okay.
And the first entry is Old French, which looks like quasar. And what's this, LL, some type of Latin?
Late lad.
Latin Latin? Casagur looks like, means to annihilate, destroy. And then goes to Latin, casus, which means empty, form, influenced in Old French, by association with. Then of course it mentions to see the next entry that Kennedy gave.
Okay. So we had both a noun form and a verb form for this word that, again, all of these, other than the first word, violence, everything else so far, unless I'm mistaken, is tracing back to Middle English, the people that were in the British Isles there. So,
One more thing, in law, it's to annul or set aside as an indictment.
as an indictment. So we've got this word quash that's come up in relation to the topic of violence. But as we dig into it, whereas the denotations, what the lexicographers put down as far as violence as being something of a physical form, of physical harm, danger to my body, to my person, to myself, we've now reached so far as in we're seeing that this is a violence in a concept, right? And I don't know if there's much more that's conceptual than law, which man's law here, what has been created, right? So obviously there's a lot more to this, and obviously there's a lot of connections to what would be the culture of this language that we call English, and the history of that, because we're seeing so many of these etymologies have their origins in the formative parts of the English language, right? So let's see, so we've covered that the body is a container. Let's make sure to cover self. I know we've looked this one up a couple times, but this is one of the most important ones to look up. Anybody get it for me? Self?
I have two. There's two selves.
Okay.
The first one says Middle English, Anglo-Saxon, self, seal.
So this one's pretty deep. I'll take some help here on what do we know of ourselves? What do we know of the word self? What do we know of its meaning? Is that I? Is that me?
Me, myself, and I.
Me, myself, and I?
It's the I, it's a subjective person.
So this is the...
It's not the object, it's the subjective.
So this
That's what I'm
is
thinking.
the mind,
Okay.
ideas, perhaps feelings.
Breath. Voice.
I think this is also, if I'm not mistaken, does this also end up relating to soul? So, again, we're getting to where violence is something that potentially exists in terms that are not just physical. If we might, as we do say, and we do say so often, as far as violence upon myself, right? So we're getting to something bigger than just, like I said, physical violence. So with that introduction on these concepts done, we're going to turn now to, I'd like to, in the mode of Dr. Black, have everything from here go in terms of, I've got questions that came to me as far as trying to sense his work, Violence in the Promised Land. And the first to propose to the class here tonight is, do we think of violence as simple or complex?
It can be simple.
Can be simple. Okay. In what terms?
Simple as like a violent storm or wind or something.
Okay.
Something like that.
What other ways might violence be simple?
Eating. I had a mindset that that we could all be at peace,
Mhm.
so-called humans, and it took me to look at nature to see that there is no such thing as peace. Peace is temporary, and that every day you are getting up trying to eat or someone's trying to eat you. So violence is natural. It's a part of nature.
Okay.
Yeah, ask the gazelle.
Say that as the gazelle
Ask the gazelle.
that swoop to the left. Can you tell that story?
Well,
Please.
it's just that in the morning, the gazelle has to get up running, because if it doesn't, then the lion is after the gazelle to eat the gazelle. If it catches it, the gazelle got to get up.
Mhm.
And the lion also has to stay aware because of people because of man.
Mhm.
So
So it seems
that's
to be
natural.
right. So nature is definitely both simple and
complex.
immensely complex at the same time, right? So if we're going to get into understanding what is violence, how does it operate, why does it continue, where are we, and how does it exist in our society, in our globe today, we definitely have to start with an understanding of it being both simple and natural and complex, and at the same time mutable, something that we can affect, right? Something that is affecting on us at the same time that we can affect it. Seems deep in thought.
What's coming from this is that it's made to be complex.
Mhm.
From what I've heard so far, I'm in agreement with it. It's simple. Because if it wasn't for violence as described earlier, then what you would get is an overpopulation. The ecosystem would just go out of whack, whether you're dealing with the animal life or even mankind. And that's why in societies, there's a certain number that is being eliminated. If you
Definitely
don't,
are.
if you don't work, you don't eat, which means if you don't eat, you shall die.
Mhm.
So, I'm sticking with it. It's simple.
Okay.
And then it can be made to be complex.
I can definitely get with that, right? I mean, if we look at any history of international warfare, I mean, what is there that's been more complex in human endeavors throughout time, right? Other than the level of self-destruction, the potential that we're sitting here on a daily basis, where the reality is our world could end tomorrow, right? I mean, that's something to be aware of because of the complex machinations that we've made and developed all the way to nuclear weaponry, right? So it is definitely a really big question that we're going to have to dig into deeply in order to probably understand. I think
I would deal with the ones who carries the biggest stick or the largest weapon definitely thinks it being simple.
because they've got the big stick.
They got to be said. They don't even question it.
Right.
We want the land. This is what has to happen. We run out of food. This is what has to happen, so that the ones that are in power shall eat.
So there's definitely an element here. We would think perhaps of preserving our own futures.
Yeah.
Someone's preserving their future.
Yeah.
Perhaps if they got the big stick, if they've got the big guns, then they've got a lot that they consider to be at stake. And they've got the machinery to preserve what they view as their future.
Okay.
Right? And so the rest of us that don't have much,
Me being on the lower, so-called quote lower level, I can claim to be complex like why me, but I don't know how I would be the same if I was at the top. And the food shortage, the food was running out.
Mhm.
You see? So
and in the end you still have to find a way to take care of yourself.
it's simple. Yeah.
So as the work is called Violence in the Promised Land, we've covered a lot of the origins and just basic things in the words and the structure and history of the words that lead to violence. What about Promised Land? Yeah, based on the laughs, I think that's a good question. Yeah. Tell me, what do we know about Promised Land? Where does that come from?
The booklet Violence in the Promised Land, and he touched on it being an illusion to keep those that believe and walk in faith in this world of not dealing with reality. You know, they're just waiting for a change instead of not making one happen for themselves. You see, so this idea of this promised land, if I'm to experience it by faith or belief, it will never happen. It's an illusion.
Right. It's yeah, please.
Could it be more of nature than a place, the promised land? You know, many people have an idea of the promised land as a place. For me personally, I see it as a nature. Far as when one attains enlightenment, could that be the promised land?
So you're saying something in an inward capacity,
State of being.
right? State of being. Okay. I definitely will go back a step and say I don't think we got anything as far as godliness and mind out of the words we were looking at for violence and body and self. But if we do consider the promised land being something as an inward journey, then we're getting in some entirely different thoughts from what the history of the words are, right?
My judgment, it'll work for the individual, but as that number grows and it's a threat to government, it would be something to be done about it. if like what's the name of the country? The Tibetans. They practice what, Buddhism now? Even the Dalai Lama has been in exile for tens of years because the Chinese government invaded Tibet, started killing all the monks, and they had to get the Dalai Lama out for fear that they was gonna kill him. China made a threat that if they didn't stop the practice, that they was gonna come back and do it again. Now, for what reason they haven't made an assault on them again, I like to think some government stronger than China told them to stay out of that country. But still, the Dalai Lama has never returned. So that idea of enlightenment, it works for the individual. But if you grow too large in number, and it's a disruption to government, look out.
I mean, I think
Now, it doesn't change the idea if you can hold fast.
we're seeing definitely there's some intersection going on. There's some interplay that is much more complicated, but at the same time simple enough that we can encounter these different pieces of it. We can encounter these different thoughts and how they interrelate to where a government power would have big interest in combating with physical violence that they might have encountered what they thought was enough of a threat just from ideas. Right? And I think we all are pretty familiar with a number of those instances throughout history. So there's definitely a big connection of this violence and this concept being out there in a way that is more broad than just weapons and just fist fights and threat to my physical body. So obviously then, this is something that we're going to, if we're going to really come to an understanding of how to protect ourselves and the people that we love, and to be prepared for the fact that government powers in the world that we have right now have enough ability to respond to thoughts and to movements and to ideas in a way that could physically harm them, then we're going to have to look at this issue really, really, really carefully. Which gets me to, I know we've encountered this a time or two, but another good word that we ought to look up is culture. So let's turn back to the dictionaries for a moment to get our minds around the term culture. How we do it, looking on finding the word culture.
Found culture.
Okay. Anybody else? I know, James, I'd love to give you another shot. You're leading the way. Anybody else got a hand on it? I know you're also leading the way, Kennedy. Anybody else? Okay. What you got?
Middle English, Latin, culture, color, see cult.
See what?
Cult.
Cult.
See cult. Okay. Let's see cult. That's interesting. Cult. Okay. What you got?
French and Latin. French, cult. Latin, cultus, care, cultivation, collier, to till, cultivate, akin to.
Akin to.
Old Norse.
Akin to Old Norse.
Old Norse.
Okay. So that word's traveling around a lot.
Old Norse, Huel, Anglo-Saxon, Huel,
When it comes to
Wheel.
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 Like a round wheel.
Okay. All right. And it definitely had an element of getting your hands into the dirt and doing the work. And that's always a very special kind of knowledge, I think, right? Okay. Let's go back to the definition of culture.
In especially prepared nurturing substance as a garden.
Okay. So I think both of those relate to what we're trying to open up here as far as culture being something organic, something that grows, something that we can have our hands on, something that we can work with, something that we're going to have to know very intimately, and the way that that relates to cultures under a microscope and looking very, very closely at them. So if we're going to study and interact with the culture of violence, then we're going to have to dig in real deep, right? I think the text definitely makes that very clear. So, what you got?
I wanted to share what the second definition that my dictionary has is the act of developing by education, discipline, training, etc.
Okay. That relates very much then to what comes up in his work, Violence on the Promised Land. The next topic would be, what is the culture of education? And how does that possibly relate to what we experience in our world in terms of violence? And that's just a big question I'm throwing out to you. What do we experience as far as the culture of education that we have in our country right now?
Sitting still, standing in single file lines, getting paddled, reading the chapter and doing the chapter review.
Not much development.
Not much development.
Just
Not much of that getting your hands dirty, digging in. Yeah. Not much of planting seeds and tending to them. Not much of looking under the microscope at the specific details of our world in order to know how the pieces come together to build up. What you got? Or is that just a stretch? Okay, gotcha. Okay,
Well,
so.
just the fact that it's just education and not teaching. Education is just stuffing it down, not breaking it into parts so the children can learn it.
Right.
just learning enough to pass the
Just
test.
learning enough to pass a test. There's no teaching. It's just educating.
What struck me with your sentence there was the use of the words stuff. And what was the second one? It was you had 2 or 3 words that definitely relate to a violent approach. There was some force, forcing information, right? Pushing it down.
Yes,
Yeah.
just,
Stuffing, pushing.
just doing a whole lot of talking and expecting the people who you're talking to, which are children, to grasp it.
Yeah.
There's no, breaking it down.
Right.
It's very passive.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. So it's being forced at them. So how are the young people supposed to get their hands around it?
Around it.
Right.
Dig in.
Yeah.
They don't have time to dig in.
Right.
Because they're being told that time is of the essence. You got to get this. It's got to happen.
And so we've seen this as the method of our education system as we know it for how long now?
About 40 years.
At least, right? Yeah. And go ahead.
Coming from the book, let me quote what I'm reading here. The public schools were designed to only create a moderately literate public. Public education in America was not designed to deliver quality education or to produce great thinkers. So see, when I take a look at the culture of education, it's created for a purpose, not to create thinkers and people to advance. It's like to create simply a workforce.
Isn't that pretty strange?
I always like to give this analogy that my husband and I talked about once. There was this football game going on. It was Vanderbilt playing some other team.
Playing the University of Tennessee?
They was playing the University of Tennessee, and Vanderbilt, which is the, top cheese school, they were losing. They were getting their butt whipped. But the one thing that they did was they held up some signs. We may be losing, but guess what the sign said? You will work for us. That's what the sign said.
Wow.
You will work for us. And I thought, I'm like, wow. Wow.
That's bold.
Oh, yes.
Bold statement.
So it lets you know that there's, when you ask this question, what is the culture of education? It lets you know that there are two types.
So these were the students had
Yeah.
taken it on themselves.
You know how, when you go to a football game, some of them are shirtless and they got all
got the
this
letters
written on
written
them.
out. Yeah.
Well, these particular students had signs up and the signs said, you will work for us.
What does that sound like to me?
So when you ask that question, here is something also. There are two educational systems. There are systems that teach you how to run the world, and then the other system is to teach you how to work for the people who run the world.
So I guess up at Vanderbilt, they're getting the system of how to run the world.
Of course.
Right.
And there are schools, there are high school kids the children are being taught how to be CEOs and own their own businesses and run this world. And then the other schools around here, they're going to teach them how to go work for Fred Smith over there at FedEx.
Keep them from being able to get your hands on the information yourselves.
There's nothing wrong with, if you were, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. But what I'm saying is if we can do better, why not?
Right.
And if we know better, then let's do something about it.
And
It should be schools like this popping up all over Memphis. When you look at the television and you see what's going on.
The exact same system that was created over 100 years ago is virtually still in place today. While small segments of the world's populations are moving fast forward into the computer age and cyberspace, large numbers of the common public are still mentally living in the pre-industrial age.
That's right.
I mean, I know oftentimes I say something about how, we like to think of ourselves as living in this modern world, right? But we just figured out what to do about bacteria less than 100 years ago. And the solution we came up with antibiotics, we've just about ruined it already from oversupply.
Right. And
They're losing their ability, right? Less than 100 years ago, if you had an infection, we were probably chopping your arm off. How much have we really accomplished into being in a modern world, into being this great place of new ideas that we try to, or someone tries to get us to think that we're living in, right?
And as it relates to education, the kids and I, we were in here because of another lesson that we had on a Wednesday night with Dr. Black. The children decided to keep researching about the Rosetta Stone. And what we found out was, in those languages in the Rosetta Stone, there were certain languages that the certain people were privy to. And then the commoners just got
So there was
this particular language.
There was a system of some have this knowledge,
So
and others
education
had
been
this.
uneven for thousands of years.
Priesthood.
That's right.
So education been, and they were like, wow, because they read it. It was like only the commoners could speak this. They wasn't privy to. It was a while before they could learn.
Right. Like I do recall, I do know that what we know of the word vulgar comes from Vulgate, which was a common person's version of Latin. It was not the book Latin of the powers that be. So this system of there's not just who's got the food and who doesn't have the food. We've also got thousands of years. It's basically as far back as we can keep track of in written history that we can get our hands on.
It's been uneven for a while.
We've got this division of some folks got the knowledge that'll get you there, and everybody else is forced to get the information that'll just get you by. Right? So here we are in this modern world that we think is so great in so many terms of our cell phones and our devices and our internet and our agriculture and our medicinal development and all these things. But ain't much of this actually that new in what really affects our lives on a day-to-day basis. Why doesn't it ever get better? Put that question to you.
Get better from who? The collective or the individual?
How about both?
For the individual, it can get better if he or she so chooses to.
Yeah.
You know, but for the collective, everyone might not want to walk the same path or do what it takes necessary to order to free themselves.
I think I definitely know from learning with the people here, changing oneself, right? I think this is kind of a core mission, is to count on that you can count on yourself, that you can count on, as you're saying, to expand yourself and to make those choices for yourself. I guess the mission is over time to have enough of ourselves who have done that work that we might even have something that starts to pull other people in. Right? I think that's the goal. I mean, tell me about that.
I mean, we have a collective here.
Yeah.
It's a small collective, but we have one.
Mm-hmm. But even then, we're still pulling in more folks. You know, just in the 6 months I've been coming to these classes, you know, start off with standing room only, and then had about 2 months of handful of folks, and then for about the last 2 months, every week there's new voices, new faces. I think I don't think I'm wrong about that. So there is definitely something to starting with yourself, and how you can and how that can grow outwards into something bigger than just the cask and container of your mind and yourself, right?
The basic call is to teach the individual how to learn, how to do research, which in turn means that if you're waiting for someone or a system to educate you, you most definitely will be lost. But if you learn the skills of how to learn, then that's why I agree with that individual change. That's why you see the size of the class, it ebbs and flows. I have a judgment. The only ones that hangs are the ones that choose to do the work. Do the work, true it up, make a decision.
And that's why this particular work of his is. That's why I definitely wanted to have this class on this topic, to get folks to get into this one, because we just had never been able to fully get into this one before. Because it'll send you in as many different directions as you want to go and that you want to engage with it, because of all the different topics and all the different thoughts, again, that are on this short collection of the 34 pages. So I guess we're gonna move at this. That's all basically the kind of things that introduce the work, you know. So we've got a frame for it now, and then as we get into the meat and the substance of it, some questions that he starts to raise are things like, why is the United States so concerned with international security?
What was the question?
Why is the United States so concerned with international security? Seems like there's a paranoia.
Okay. Then maybe the United States feels that their security is being threatened.
Okay.
So you have to monitor the world.
Mm-hmm.
The world security. Because I heard recently, man, in the news that the U.S. dollar is being rejected in trade by certain countries. They no longer want to trade with the U.S. dollar. You want what I have to export? Bring me either the currency that you have in mind or gold. And when you get back to exchange on the gold standard, that promissory note, that legal tender won't be worth that roll is in the bathroom.
No. that's a topic that is on my list to. I don't know anything about, like the gold standard.
Yeah,
I know that we have been on it. I know we've come off of it.
that's right.
But what that means, I don't know.
Right. We've had a couple of presidents that took the nation off the gold standard. I think the last was one of the Roosevelts, right? I have to get back in there, but it was done in the 1800s by another president. I can't think of which one it was.
And that's information we're going to have to encounter and explore. Good topics for next week, probably.
I think during World War II, they was calling in all the gold. All gold jewelry, all gold bullions, for exchange for the legal tender.
So I guess let me try to give this a little more context, turn it to the document here. Quote from the document. We're getting into the section called Violence, Poverty, and Race. So we have recorded in the annals of American history are accounts of violent acts of retribution by individuals like Nat Turner or Denmark Vesey. These American insurrectionists gave so-called white people cause to fear a possible black uprising. Historical acts of retribution are thought to be the reason why attitudes of fear and worry about internal national security have developed in the psyches of so-called white people of the United States. So that's from the document here. So we have powers that be learn to fear, right?
Was it as a result of their action? They did something to somebody, so now they're fearful of what payback.
Right. Right. It does say retribution, right? So there's been an interplay. There's been, of course, what we know of the historical oppression and dominance and violence. But the assertion here is perhaps this need of the leadership of the United States to be so involved in the rest of the world and the insecurity that the United States has is a reflection of its own past. So this in a way, this relates to what does immigration mean to the country, to this instability that the country has, and that the leadership of the country has created through the history of their decisions and their policies, right? So we see immigration. We know it's a hot topic. That I can say I know. I know it's a hot topic. And this seems to be something worth considering as far as how does immigration relate to the violence of thought.
Mass immigration today, I can't say it may have worked the same in the past, but what it does, it takes away the idea of one people against another people. With mass immigration, you got all these different cultures coming in. Now it looks like to inflict the same on. It gets more difficult to put the same pressure on all the other different cultures that's coming in. At one time, which was easier when it was just, I'll say, black against white, or white against black, or the powers that be against the lower class, right? And that takes away the color. So, with mass immigration, people coming from all parts of Europe, continuing, all parts of Asia, the Middle East, seems to me that they're losing control that way. Because how do you hold down all these different cultures the way you were able to one people in the past, when the people who are now coming over are bringing with them their culture, their idea of sticking together and being as productive as possible. I think it's a threat to, I can see how it could be a threat to national security, or made to believe that it's a threat to national security.
So we got,
Because there's a lot of cultures that are productive, and that's which they produce their income, it leaves the country. I can remember years ago, a co-worker asked me, hey, sir, man, have you ever seen an Asian in the bank? I said, not really. He said, very few times when you go into, that was then, you go into a bank, and you didn't see any Asian. But yet we have plenty of Asians in this country, in this city. So where do they bank? You see?
Mm-hmm.
So that's always been a threat. I can see how that would be a threat to security of the nation.
so if we're to presume, as we do, and it's not just presume, if we know that there are powers that be, and these powers that be do not have our interests in mind, if we're to go back to things as basic as everybody having the right to eat, or the need to eat at the very least, then we know there are powers that be. And we know that those powers that be used the mechanics of oppression and the model of slavery and the pieces of those things. We know that they then, through history, we know how those divisions have been magnified. We know that people have been put at odds with each other. And it's something that we've got to look very closely at to be sure how much and how this has been done from above, right? And if there are now many, many, many different groups of people who have their selves and have their self-identity, have the confidence of that they have a collectivized self, a community, then there's a lot of different communities that have some real power. And that power is pushing back against the mechanics of how the powers that be have basically kept us at odds with each other, right? It's almost like we are, this opportunity with immigration really resets so many things for us to be able to learn from each other and perhaps to unite across different subgroups and different cultures and things.
Yeah.
So if we are looking at a system that is trying to maintain real power at the top, then that does look very much like a threat to that power and to their sense of international security. So we get to the next section here on another heavy topic. I guess I'll transition in this way. We know that police forces are one representation of where power lies. What do the police forces, what do they serve, and what do they protect? Property, holdings, policy, power. Yeah. So we've got rising levels of a people power. We have insecurity among the leadership. And we know that their model of preserving and protecting their interests. Yes, James?
Police protect the city.
Police protect the city. And How did they do so?
So we looked up police, and that took us to politics, and we looked up politics, and that means
The city. So, sounds like a good time to look up the word city then. I can't say I've ever looked up the word city.
It gets a civilized citizen.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
found city.
Found city.
Middle English and Old French, citet, Latin, civitas, survive, citizen, original citizenship, community of citizens. Hence, one of the Gaulish states, chief town in such a state.
So, they're protecting a city. A city is then made up of citizens, and those citizens represent the state. That definitely sounds to me like the elements of power are definitely historically the citizens who make up the state. So I don't see anything at odds there. Which, if we're talking about policing, we get to other interesting topics, such as the history of sales of contraband, and how that relates to, drugs we see on the streets versus origins of who else in this country, in its history, has participated in making capital from contraband when faced with desperate situations.
Well, the police are in a desperate situation, but they make big money off of contraband.
Don't they?
That's right.
Big money.
Seize everything.
Yes, they do.
Houses, cars.
And not only that, they stopping you and they take you to jail for having so much of marijuana, and they make money off of that because of you having the contraband.
Mm-hmm.
Just a little bit of marijuana.
Mm-hmm.
Then you gotta go to court, you go to jail, you gotta pay bail, you might get time, it just depends.
But on the large scale, what was mentioned earlier, government has for a long time taken contraband taken off the hands of, I guess, dealers, and cashed in on it, had to sell to improve their equipment, their fighting equipment. But more so, I can recall hearing about even the CIA during the Vietnam War brought more drugs into this country and made money off it, because I think their budget had been cut by some president. It might have been Johnson, I guess, if I can think back that far. So what they did was they brought drugs into the country to boost up the loss that they to make up for the loss that government cut on their budget.
That's really out there. This is knowledge. This is real politics, right? I mean, looking at right now, how many of our soldiers are guarding the poppy fields in Afghanistan? Right now. How much was brought out of the heroin production in Southeast Asia during the Vietnam War? How much in the name of what we know from the Iran-Contra issues of the 80s, how much cocaine was coming through our federal government that, again, the CIA was making profit from? But here down on the individual citizen level, your lives are ruined.
It's where they claim the war on drugs exists.
Yes, this war on drugs that they got all these interests all across the globe real power, real weapons. You know, one man destroying machines with all the gear that's on a U.S. soldier out in the field right now, standing there guarding poppies. But you get caught with a little something that you made a mistake or you made a choice or you did whatever. And your life's ruined. And you are where the war is. Something about this is pretty weird. But it is definitely a reality. And if we're looking at things that are weird realities, what are the dangers of beliefs and opinions? Let's look up, let's get to the word opinion. Because I know where my studies with opinion took me, so I'm curious what we might find here.
That's a good question, because I don't really think that overall people think that is a danger to your beliefs and opinions.
Mm-hmm. We know there's definitely a danger in being wrong.
Right.
Found it.
Yeah.
Middle English, Open Old French, Latin. Opinio, opinary, to think, akin to, opler, to select, desire, see option.
Desire. So we're getting the word desire out of opinion. I think we've certainly covered how dangerous desire can be, right? Let's go back. Let's while we're there, let's review desire.
Desire, I want or wish, or to want. Or
To
wish.
want, to wish. To have an emotional attachment to something. To have something that's right. We're talking desire. Yeah. What we got on the definitions? I know what we're encountering here is that opinions have emotions behind them. And folks with opinions and emotions, what gets to happening when you got a lot of opinion and you got a lot of emotion?
Arguments.
A lot of confusion.
Yep. Yep. What'd you find?
Is it what you found?
I found desire.
Yeah, awesome.
Middle English, desiring, Old French, desire, Latin, desiderare, to long for desire, original, to awake from the stars, from sideris, star, see, consider.
So we're getting to
Consider.
consider. Well, let's go to consider then. And we've definitely covered that desire is dangerous. I know with the desiderata, we have definitely learned how to make the most of ourselves, right?
Found it.
Got it. Okay.
Middle English, consider. Old French, consider. Latin, consider. To look at closely, observe. A star.
To observe the stars.
To observe the stars.
And then that star, and it says it's more at sidereal. Sidereal is spelled, well, sidereal is spelled sidereal.
Mm-hmm. So we're getting a lot of layers of a relationship and interplay in being careful about emotions, opinions, thoughts, considerations as things to take seriously. Which kind of brings up, are there institutions that are able to affect what we consider? Are there institutions in the world that we have right now that are able to affect our thoughts, that are able to affect the social conditions that we're in? And what might some of those institutions look like? What might they be?
Religion.
How so?
What did you say?
Religion. Yeah.
Persuasive is the first word that comes to mind. They can be persuasive.
Certainly with all those people in a big community, which relates to the persuasiveness of communities and the power in being informed, the power in knowing, the power in studying, the power in connecting to yourself and to your experiences versus having those experiences given to you, right? I'll throw out there what this is a hot topic right now. What about the media? How much influence potentially is the media? Who are they? What are they doing? Why are they doing it? Who's paying them? Where's the money coming from? What purpose is there for all of the money in this big media? Why do we have mass media in the first place, and what are they capable of? Seems like a really big question to try to wrap our minds around. Seems almost like you were saying something else.
I was thinking, you're right, the question about the media is definitely being looked at. And the new president-elect is putting light on a lot if we take a closer look at it. What I mean by that is this. He's only going to honor the media that he can depend on, that won't challenge anything. And that's all. I have a judgment. That's always been the way the government is set up. Anyway, the government controls the media. But when you have the alternative media, who gets access to those press conferences and start asking certain questions, they get ignored. But the president-elect not only do that, does he verbally points his finger at them and tell them, "You're no good. You represent a media that's counter to the country," and oh man. One of my favorites that I watch pretty regular on the internet is Democracy Now! I enjoy that. And that organization, that to include the Amy Goodman, she's been arrested and beat down, but she's hung in there for a long time. Democracy Now! Is not the only one, but that's one of the better alternatives out there.
Sure. There are some.
There are some.
There are some.
And it's not Democracy Now! Is not the only one. But yeah.
I know just today, our president-elect told a senior reporter from CNN that he was fake news.
That's the term.
I
Fake
saw
news.
that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
BuzzFeed.
From everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Leave them alone.
We did have quite an interesting piece circulate big time last night. That, Scott, that was the topic and the reason for this very unusual exchange of a president-elect telling a prominent journalist that they were fake news. So we're definitely living in a very interesting time for information right now. Right? Might this not relate to what we were talking about, what Mr. Lewis read from a while back about being prepared for the information age, being prepared for, as Dr. Black writes, the psionics, the influence, orchestrated concepts. I know I can tell you, for me personally, something I know is that in the politics I was working, let's go back about a year ago right now, there was positive energy and unified thought across the entire country among a rising consciousness of all kinds of people, all kinds of background, ages, location, everything. And I do know for sure that right as we started to have some strength and awareness of our own consciousness and our own collective thought was when they're all of a sudden, all of these sites you'd never heard of before in your life, suddenly there was a different link, seemed like a different name, a different piece of information, a different spin on it, just blowing up everywhere. So, certainly something to think about as far as what's happening, not just in main media, not just in alternative media, not just in blogging, and how much this all relates to how carefully that we've all got to be sure of what we know, and to be sure of what we're reading, to check, to double check, to check again, and do one more big favor for Dr. Black, check one more time. So as all these things kind of come together, we've experienced for a long time now a lot of blame, a lot of finger pointing being placed on the children, being placed on the youth for the violence and the trouble that we're seeing in this country. And I can't see how any of that makes any sense.
Yeah, that's
I mean, I think, we've certainly covered from our studies here, from our knowledge, from our experiences. The children didn't make it up. The children didn't create guns. The children weren't over in Afghanistan in the poppy fields. The children weren't in Vietnam. The children weren't making these decisions.
And where they live, all that you just saying is not being manufactured where they live.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, where is it coming from?
Exactly.
Why? These are all things covered in the scope of this paper to expand how all these pieces come together. Because really, this is almost everything that we talk about in this class gets connected in some way through the course of this paper here. I know we've talked about some about the scope of violence throughout history. And if we're going to know about violence, if we're going to know what to do, if we're going to know how to survive, we definitely have to have a sense of the scope of violence throughout history. And to that topic, to really connect this is what I hope gets some really good discussion here. Is violence an energy? And if violence is an energy, what does that mean? And what is our relationship with it? And we've been discussing as there are ways that just from encountering the words and self and body in the ways that we know of violence happening to us, just in those words, we encountered violence being something that's bigger, more broad at least in thought than just specifically someone shooting at me. Right? Is there not possibly, as we were saying, a violence of the media, as we were just discussing? Is that not something that is a violence, a violation of our thoughts, of our knowledge, perhaps of our unity, perhaps of just being able to communicate with each other? Is there not possibly a violence in what we would call the money hoarders, what we would call greed, what we would call consumerism? If we're looking at just the basic needs of being able to eat, being able to sleep, being able to stay warm, then it seems to me, I wonder what you think, as far as those mechanics of greed being a certain kind of violence against average people. And we know we're certainly facing that in rising numbers as far as inequality.
In my dictionary, it refers to vehemence in feeling, passion, ardor, fury, or fervor.
what
So
does
it's violence. So there appears to be emotion attached to it.
Mm-hmm. Energy. Yeah. So I know a big part of this paper is having an awareness of the different thoughts, the different models, the different things, where if we know these things are acting upon us,
Excuse me.
how do we respond?
The children, when you started talking about money hoarders, they brought up, what did y'all bring up?
Yeah.
They brought it up themselves. Go ahead, say it.
Money hungry, glory craving leeches.
And that comes out of what?
For my people.
Exactly.
Uh-huh.
So they're listening,
Mm-hmm.
and that's definitely got to be an energy.
Mm-hmm.
That.
Yeah.
Money hungry,
Glory
craving leeches.
Leeches.
That's got to be.
And we know what leeches are, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think that is a very personal, intimate kind of violence then. So, I think greed would then definitely be a form of violence. And the idea is to expand and be aware of this, what these things are acting upon us, to know, one, how to be careful, and to know, two, how to make some change for yourselves, right? If we know that violence can be perpetuated with the power of language, with the powers of energy, emotion, etc., what tools do we have to understand and reduce that power? I'm not going to say I have the answers. I'm going to say that I hope we do have the tools. Yeah, what are possibly some tools?
Etymology. Knowing how to discern for yourself. Knowing how to listen to someone and see if they know what they're talking about or not. If they're limited in their understanding of the words.
And they might be coming at you in the wrong way.
Right.
Yeah.
It's because they throw something at you don't mean you have to catch it and hold it.
We might want to ask, who are the people that are perpetuating the methods? You know, we might need to know who the individuals are, what the systems are.
The dull and ignorant. The dull and ignorant, they too have a voice.
What's the question?
The question is, if we're talking about that violence can be perpetuated with the power of language, with the influence of media, with knowledge, etc. What, and we know that there are tools to reduce that power, then we might want to know who is perpetuating these methods of energy, these methods of greed, which really does work through the text as a whole. And what I have prepared to share, and I guess what I can provide as far as discussion on that work, it's something to make sure and read, to really be in tune with what Dr. Black's trying to share with everyone.
Thank you.
So yeah, that's what I have for class for tonight.
All right.
Yeah.
Good job, Alex.
Thank you very much.
Great.
I enjoyed it.
Big shoes to fill.
So I guess that might have us in a position of adjourning a little earlier than usual.
Hold on, we got past that.
But I certainly.
Black, he wanted to mention about the children learning about the stock market and everything. But I don't necessarily have anything, but he wanted to be a conversation about there are other ways of looking for of making money versus going out looking for jobs. You do have other ways of trying to make money, and some basic is learning the stock market. Learning the stock market is not basic, but you can start off with some of the basic elements of just learning the symbols.
You've gone through that book excessively. Is that how you read all books?
If it's not something where like I can remember for sure everything that I got from one paragraph to the next, like if I get to the end of the paragraph and I'm like, I don't think I've got all of that thought into my head yet. And I'll go back and I'll read each individual paragraph until I feel like I move on. And with this text, even about 3 times through, there's so much to think about that I ended up taking 6 pages of notes just to feel like I had some kind of real reference to everything that he was discussing.